Welcome to Testing Your Code with Python's unit test. My name is Christopher, and I will be your guide. This course is an introduction to doing automated testing on your Python code. You'll learn about constructing tests with the standard library's test case class, running tests, using the assert methods of test case to validate your code results, skipping tests, grouping values together in subtests, and setting your tests up with fixtures. The code in this course was tested with Python 3.14. Everything you'll see here is part of the standard library and has been around for quite some time, so as long as you're using a supported version, you'll be fine. When you develop software, you want to make sure it works, and so you test it. If you're just building short one-off scripts, that usually just means running it. But for bigger pieces of software, especially those used by others, you need to be more comprehensive. Ideally, each time you make a change, you want to test your code to make sure you didn't introduce a new bug. Automating this process is considered a best practice in the industry. Just what does that mean, though? It means writing code that tests your code. In fact, a good rule of thumb is about one line of test code for each line of program code in your software. A unit test is a small program that calls your code and checks that with certain inputs, expected output is returned. Automating this means you can run it more frequently, the tests themselves are faster than manual, and less error-prone to boot. Most major languages now include unit testing libraries, and Python's is called the unit test module. There are also third-party libraries as well, but I'll be concentrating on unit test in this course. To write a unit test in Python using the unit test module, you define a class that inherits from a test case. Within that class, you declare methods that are your tests. Then when you run the test framework, it will find these classes for you and run your code. In the next lesson, I'll show you how to write those test case subclasses and how to run your test suite. In the previous lesson, I gave an overview of the course. In this lesson, I'll introduce you to the test case class and how to discover and run your tests. As I mentioned in the overview, the standard library has a module named unittest, which includes the tools you need to write automated unit tests in Python. The module itself is executable, and when you run it, it looks for your tests, creates a test suite, and then executes that suite. You run Python modules using the -m flag. To run test discovery, you do python -m unit test. This executable module looks for Python files that start with test_, and then looks in those files to create a test suite. The discovery process will look in the current module as well as subdirectories, so if you have a lot of tests, you can stick them together in a directory. Common practice is to name that directory tests. Inside any of the test files that start with test_, you import the test case class from unittest and create a class that inherits from it. You can have more than one of these in your test file if you like, using the same kinds of practices you would with your code, putting things that make sense together in the same file. You define the tests to be run by writing methods in your test case class. Any method that starts with test_ is considered a test. If a test method finishes without throwing an exception, the test is considered passed. So to recap, you might have a test directory, which contains one or more test_py files, which contain one or more test case classes, which can contain one or more test_ methods. So that's tests, test case, test. Yeah, that's a lot of the word test. This might seem strange, but it makes it simple for the discovery process to know what is and isn't a test and allow it to properly create a suite. Test case classes can contain methods that don't start with test_, so if you've got common code you want your tests to call, you can do that. And since they don't start with test_, they won't be considered a test. Let's look at some sample code and a test class to go with it. This is simple.py. If you've downloaded the sample code using the supporting materials dropdown below the video player, this file is in the intro directory. It isn't particularly complicated code, just a function that prints hello to the screen. The interesting part isn't here, but in the tests that go along with it. This is test_simple.py, which is also in the intro directory. This file contains the single test for my code. You define tests as methods on a class which inherit from unittest test case, so I need to start out by importing the base class. In order to test the code, you need to be able to call it from this file. So here, I'm importing the function that I'm going to test. This class defines my set of tests. The name is more or less irrelevant. That's not to say you shouldn't name it well, but Python looks for anything that inherits from test case, so you can think of it as a label that helps you understand what it is. I've called it simple test case, but people don't always call it a test case. Sometimes they just call it a test. Some people put the word test first, so it could be simple test case, simple test, or test simple. I tend to put the name before test to make it more searchable, but that's just me. As long as you inherit from the base test case class, the unit test discovery process will find it. Your test case class isn't special, it's just a regular Python class. Within it, you define methods. The unit test discovery process looks for methods that have a name starting with test underscore, like test say hello does here. Test methods don't take arguments, well, except for the usual self that all methods in a class require. You can have methods that don't start with test, but those don't get run by the discovery process. That can be helpful if you want to write utility methods for use in your class. I'll talk more about that in a future lesson. So once more, if it's in a file that starts with test, in a subclass of test case, and starts with the word test, then the unit test framework will run it as a test. Inside of the test method, you run the code you want to test. Our sayHello method doesn't really do anything, so you can't really check if it works. You can make sure that it doesn't blow up, though. If sayHello throws an exception, this test will fail. If all the code in a test method runs without an exception being thrown, then the test passes. Okay, that's the test script. Let's run it. I'm going to execute the unit test module inside of the intro directory. The -v argument means verbose. This makes the test framework a little more chatty. There's a few things to look at in the output here. First, it says the name of the test method. Then it gives the fully qualified name of the test. This includes the file name, the class name, and the method name. You can use this label to invoke this test explicitly, but I'll show you that in a future lesson. The word hello isn't from the testing framework, but a side effect of what was being tested. Recall that the sayHello method called print. This is the result of that print. This can be a little strange. Normally your print starts at the beginning of the line, but the test framework printed something there instead, so your test's output gets intermixed. This can take a little getting used to, especially if you've sprinkled prints in your code for debugging. It won't always appear on the screen in the place you might expect. Finally, the test framework outputs a summary. In this case, there was only one test, and it tells you that it went so quickly that the timing rounds to 0. If any of your tests fail, this would be the spot where you'd see that. I'll show you an example of failure later as well. Okay, that's the basic structure. Next up, I'll show you a more realistic test where you validate your code's outcome. In the previous lesson, I showed you the basic structure of a test class. In this lesson, I'll show you how to test the results of your code. You'll recall that your test class inherits from the test case base class. That base class includes a whole whack of methods to help you validate results from your code. Each of them does a different kind of comparison against an expected value, and they raise an exception if the comparison fails. There's a family of these methods, and they all begin with the word assert. Two things to note here. First, although they share the name assert with the Python keyword, these are just methods on the base class. They aren't actually the assert call. They use the keyword inside of the method, but it is still just a method. The second thing to note is that the unit test module has been around for a long time, before Python was consistent about naming conventions. All of the assert methods are in camel case, also known as mixed case, unlike the current naming convention of using snake case, where everything is small letters and separated by underscores. This makes my OCD a little cranky, but so be it. Since these assertion methods call assert, and since asserts that fail raise an assertion error, if the comparison fails, the method raises an exception. Tests that raise exceptions are considered failed by the framework. There isn't anything magical about assertion errors. If your code blows up and raises an exception for some other reason, that will also fail the test. Let's look at an example that is a little more realistic than the previous lesson's Hello World. I'm inside of the check values directory and looking at ages.py. This file has a single function called categorize that takes an integer and returns a string based on the age of the argument. If the person is between 0 and 9 years old, inclusive, the word child gets returned. 10 to 18 are teens, 19 to 150 is adult, and everything else is considered an invalid age. Before I show you the test code, think about what you would do to test this function. You'd want to test each of the possible conditions. So at bare minimum, you'd call the code 4 times. But what if I messed up and accidentally made one of those greater than equals just a greater than? Or if I missed an age in the ranges? To properly test, you should consider calling the function on both edges of every range to make sure you didn't mess anything up. That can mean a lot of testing code. In fact, it's going to take 40 odd lines of test code to test this 11-line function. My tests are a little overly verbose because I'm teaching them to you, but still, I go back to that rule of thumb I mentioned before. It often takes about the same number of lines to test as it does to write the code itself. Let's look at the test. This is testAge.py. As before, I'm importing test case, and similar to the last time, I'm importing the thing that I'm going to test. My test class has several methods. The first one tests values that return child. You can organize your tests however you like. Here I've grouped them by output. I'll babble a little more about that in a minute, but for now, let's look at this test. Your test method can optionally take a docstring. If you do, that information will be printed to the screen when the framework runs. I don't normally bother myself, as the name of the test method is often good enough, but it's there if you want it. When you test something, you need 3 things. First, you need to know what you're testing. Second, you need to know what you're changing. And third, you need to verify the result. If you've ever heard of given when then testing, which is popular in the behavioral-driven development world, that's what it's describing. Given, I'm testing the categorize function. When I call it with 0, then I get back the word child. In the test code here, I'm explicitly calling out those 3 things, but in a different order. I start by defining a variable that holds my expected value. That's the thing I hope my code outputs. This is the then part of given when then. Next, I call the function with 0 as an argument and store the result. This is the given and when parts. And finally, I finish the then part by calling an assert method to validate that my expected value and returned results match. The assert equal method does what its name implies. It asserts that the 2 values passed in are equal. So if expected and result match, the assert passes and no exception gets raised. The assert equal method doesn't care about the order of the arguments, but I highly recommend that you be consistent. If the assertion fails, the framework will print out a comparison for you. Consistently putting your arguments in the same order keeps the error output in that order, making it easier to remember and understand. I'm not sure where I picked this convention up, so I don't know if everyone else does it this way, but I always put the expected value first. For other kinds of assertions, the order is important, but I'll cover those in the next lesson. So far, I've only tested a single value. These 2 lines call our function again, this time with an argument of 9. The expected value is the same, so it can be reused. And like before, you compare the expected and resulting values. I've already commented that I'm being verbose here. There's nothing wrong with doing all of this on a single line, hard-coding child as the first argument to assert equal, and then calling the function as the second argument. Personally, I tend to separate it out because it's easier to scan the code and see what is being tested, but I could see how other programmers might think that this was way too many lines of code and do something a little simpler. I have a different test for each of our 4 possible results. This one is for the teen case. It does the same things the child one does, but with a different range of values. Then another for adult, and another for error handling. Error handling can seem a little strange at first, as you're trying to make the code behave in a non-typical way. But if your code is supposed to gracefully handle a problem, then you should test that it is doing that. Our categorize function returns a string to indicate that the age passed in wasn't in the valid range, so this function makes sure that it does what it's supposed to. The expected value is a little different this time because the string is supposed to include the age inside of it. Here, I'm starting with the first part of the string. Then, in the assert equal, I tack on the -1 that is supposed to be included in the result. Same goes here for a large value, tacking on 151 for this case. Let me open a terminal and I'll run these tests. I'll start by invoking unittest with -v like I did before. Let me scroll back up here. Each of the test methods in the class gets called. You can see the name of the method, the doc string from the method, then the colorized OK to indicate that the test passed. And down here at the bottom, you can see the summary. 4 tests got run, and they all passed. So far, I've been using the verbose flag. Let's try it again without it. When you're not in verbose mode, each test prints a dot to the screen. Failed tests show an E or F. Here, the 4 dots mean 4 passed tests. Most of the time when I run tests, I don't use verbose. I typically only go into that mode when I'm trying to debug a test or something weird is going on. For example, if you misspell test in your test method, it won't get run. So if you were expecting 5 tests and only got 4, turning -v on will show you exactly what happened. If you have a lot of tests and don't want to run them all, you can pass a string to unittest in order to be specific about a single test or class. The string is in the same format as the fully qualified name shown in verbose mode, starting with the directory if there is one, then the file name, then the class name, and if you want to run a specific method, then that as well. Without the method, you'd get all of the tests in the class. Here, I've invoked the testAdult method only, and not surprisingly, it passes. Note, the summary shows that only a single test got run this time. Although assert equal is probably the most common assertion method to use, it is only one of very many. In the next lesson, you'll see the very many.